Good morning, everyone. I hope you have had a great day so far. Today we will be reading chapter 7 in Because of Winn, Dixie. And before we get into it, what I would like you to do is to just think of who your favorite character is so far in the story. I know that we have learned about quite a few different characters so far, and we're only into chapter 7. So what I'd like you to do is just in the comments below this video, go ahead and state who your favorite character is and why. So go ahead and take some time to do that before we go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and get started with chapter 7, which is on page 44. So remember, yesterday when we were reading chapter 6, Opal and Winn Dixie went to a library, which is a very small library. And remember that the librarian, Franny, got very scared all of a sudden because she thought that she saw a bear in the window, but who was it actually? It was Winn Dixie. Alright, so today, Franny's going to tell Opal that story of when she saw the bear in the library quite a few years ago. Alright, so on page 45, we're going to go ahead and get started with chapter 7. Back when Florida was wild, when it consisted of nothing but palmetto trees and mosquitoes so big they could fly away with you, Miss Franny Block started in. And I was just a little girl no bigger than you. My father, Herman W. Block, told me that I could have anything I wanted for my birthday. Anything at all. Miss Franny looked around the library. She leaned in close to me. I don't want to appear prideful, she said, but my daddy was a very rich man. A very rich man. She nodded and then leaned back and said, and I was a little girl who loved to read. So I told him, I said, Daddy, I would most certainly love to have a library for my birthday. A small little library would be wonderful. You asked for a whole library? A small one, Miss Franny nodded. I wanted a little house full of nothing but books, and I wanted to share them too. And I got my wish. My father built me this house, the very one we are sitting in now. And at a very young age, I became a librarian. Yes, ma'am. What about the bear? I said. Did I mention that Florida was wild in those days? Miss Franny Block said. Uh-huh, you did. It was wild. There were wild men and wild women and wild animals. Like bears. Yes, ma'am, that's right. Now, I have to tell you, I was a little Miss Know-It-All. I was a Miss Smarty Pants with my library full of books. Oh, yes, ma'am, I thought I knew the answers to everything. Well, one hot Thursday, I was sitting in my library with all the doors and windows open and my nose stuck in a book when a shadow crossed the desk. And without looking up, yes, ma'am, without even looking up, I said, Is there a book I can help you find? Well, there was no answer. And I thought it might have been a wild man or a wild woman, scared of all these books and afraid to speak up. But then I became aware of a very peculiar smell, a very strong smell. I raised my eyes slowly, and standing right in front of me was a bear. Yes, ma'am, a very large bear. How big? I asked. Oh, well, said Miss Franny, perhaps 3 times the size of your dog. Then what happened? I asked her. Well, said Miss Franny, I looked at him and he looked at me. He put his big nose up in the air and sniffed as if he was trying to decide if a little Miss Know-it-all librarian was what he was in the mood to eat. And I sat there, and then I thought, well, if this bear intends to eat me, I am not going to let it happen without a fight. No, ma'am. So very slowly and very carefully, I raised up the book I was reading. What book was it? I asked. Why, it was War and Peace, a very large book. I raised it up slowly, and then I aimed it carefully, and I threw it right at that bear and screamed, "Be gone!" And do you know what? No, ma'am, I said. He went, but this is what I will never forget. He took the book with him. "Nuh-uh," I said. "Yes, ma'am," said Miss Franny. He snatched it up and ran. Did he come back? I asked. No, I never saw him again. Well, the men in town used to tease me about it. They used to say, "Miss Franny, we saw that bear of yours out in the woods today. He was reading that book, and he said it sure was good, and would it be all right if he kept it for just another week?" Yes, ma'am, they did tease me about it. She sighed. I imagine I'm the only one left from those days. I imagine I'm the only one that even recalls that bear. All my friends, everyone I knew when I was young, they are all dead and gone. She sighed again. She looked sad and old and wrinkled. It was the same way I felt sometimes, being friendless in a new town and not having a mamma to comfort me. I sighed too. When Dixie raised his head off his paws and looked back and forth between me and Miss Franny, he sat up then and showed Miss Franny his teeth. Well, now look at that, she said. That dog is smiling at me. It's a talent of his, I told her. It is a fine talent, Miss Franny said. A very fine talent. And she smiled back at Winn-Dixie. We could be friends, I said to Miss Franny. I mean, you and me and Winn-Dixie. We could all be friends. Miss Franny smiled even bigger. Why, that would be grand, she said. Just grand. And right at that minute, right when the three of us had decided to be friends, who should come marching in to the Herman W. Block Memorial Library but old pinch-faced Amanda Wilkinson. She walked right up to Miss Franny's desk and said, I finished Johnny Tremain and I enjoyed it very much. I would like something even more difficult to read now because I am an advanced reader. Yes, dear, I know, said Miss Franny. She got up out of her chair. Amanda pretended like I wasn't there. She stared right past me. Are dogs allowed in the library? She asked Miss Franny as they walked away. Certain ones, said Miss Franny. A select few. And then she turned around and winked at me. I smiled back. I had just made my first friend in Naomi, and nobody was going to mess that up for me. Not even old pinch-faced Amanda Wilkinson. All right, that is the end of chapter 7. Before we move on to the vocabulary, I just have a few questions I want you guys to think about. So the first one is, Franny told us how she got her library, and she named it and go back to what page it was. On page 51, it says that the library was called the Herman W. Block Memorial Library. Why did she name the library Herman W. Block Memorial Library? If you want to go back at the beginning of the chapter, she talks about how she got the library. So think if you can go back into the story and see why she named it the Herman W. Block Memorial Library. I'll give you a little bit of time to think about that. in the beginning of chapter 7, let's go page 45, it says that she was just a little girl when her father, Herman W. Block, told her that she could have anything she wanted for her birthday. So she named her library after her father because her father was the one who bought the building and gave her the library. So she named it after her father in honor of him or to remember who gave her the library in the first place. Alright, my next question is, we learned a little bit more about Franny throughout this chapter. So I want you to do is see if you can come up with any different character traits of Franny and see if you can use textual evidence. Alright, so I'll give you a little bit of time to think about that. See if you can come up with any character qualities or any words that you can use to describe Franny, but make sure that you have evidence from the text to support your reasoning. Alright, I hope you have the answer. We're not going to answer it right now. We'll go back to it. But right now we're going to move on to vocabulary. So the two words that I want us to focus on today in vocabulary are the words peculiar and prideful. Alright, so the first word, peculiar, is number 12 in your vocabulary packet. So it's the first one on the second page of your vocabulary. Alright, and we're going to do this one together. So if we go back to our text, because remember, we can always use context clues or a dictionary to help us figure out what the definition of new vocabulary words are. So we go back to chapter 7. I lost my spot. Let's see. Alright, let's go to page 47. Alright, on page 47 is where the word peculiar is used. So if we go into the last paragraph, so here's page 47, so if we go into this paragraph right here, we'll go ahead, I'll start reading it. And we'll see if we can use the context clues to help us figure out what the word peculiar means. Alright, well, there was no answer, and I thought it might have been a wild man or a wild woman, scared of all these books and afraid to speak up. But then I became aware of a very peculiar smell, a very strong smell. I raised my eyes slowly, and standing right in front of me was a bear. Okay, so we have our context clues for the word peculiar. Now if I read it again, it says that Franny became aware of a very peculiar smell, a very strong smell. So maybe when she was breathing, so she probably inhaled with her nose, she caught a whiff of something or she smelled something. And peculiar means it was probably something a little different than what she usually smells. Alright, so it told her that it probably wasn't a human being. So the word peculiar means strange or odd or unusual. So when Franny smelled the air that was in her library, she noticed that it didn't smell like a normal human being, and it had a very strong, rather odd odor or scent. So when she looked up, she realized that it wasn't a human at all, it was a bear. Alright, so that is how we used our context clues to help us decide what the word peculiar means. I would also like you to do the same thing for the word prideful. That happens before the word peculiar, so if you want to flip your book, let's go, maybe the page before. Let me see if I can find it. I just had it and I lost it. But okay, see if you can find the word peculiar in chapter 7. I promise it's in here because I found it earlier. Alright, see if you can go back and find the word peculiar. Use context clues as to how the word is used in the text, as well as if you have a dictionary, alright, to help you with the definition of prideful. And maybe you have heard someone in the past describe someone as prideful, alright? Usually when someone's prideful, their head might be a little taller than others, alright? So that might give you a little hint about what the word prideful means. But go ahead and go back in the text and see if you can find the word prideful in chapter 7, alright? And then use your context clues to help you decide what the definition of that word is. All right. If you have any questions, of course, you can just message me or ask me in the comments below. All right. The next thing we're going to do for reading today is we're going to go to our characters page, and you'll see I have Opal and Winn Dixie filled out because those are the two that we have done so far. But you'll see the next one we're going to do is Miss Franny Block. All right, so go ahead and get that out, and we're going to work on Miss Franny Block together, okay? So I wanted to do first is get my handy dandy whiteboard out, and I'm going to write Franny at the top of it, and I'm going to see if we can come up with different ideas or different evidence from the text that we can use to help describe Franny, all right? I have her name written up here. All right, so let's think of some different ideas or different things from the text that we read about to learn about Franny, okay? So one that pops up to me was that she kind of fought a bear because she threw a book at him. So she fought a bear to get out of her library. Finish writing it here. Alright, so that's one fact we know about her. Is it a character quality? Not necessarily, but we can use the facts that we learned about her to help decide what character qualities best match her. Another one is she didn't really have any friends because a lot of them had passed away. Not until Opal asked her to be her friend, which we'll pause real quick and think about, why do you think Opal asked her to be her friend? We can go back in the text and look, or maybe if we remember what we read, think about why would Opal ask Franny to be her friend? Give you a few more moments to think about it while I finish writing this. Okay. Alright, so if we go back in the text, we'll notice that when Franny said a lot of the people who had remembered the bear story had passed away, which tells us that Franny is also older. So she's probably an older woman. But we also noticed that Opal felt very similar to what Franny was feeling because she understood what it meant to be alone. And so she figured that since Franny is alone and she is alone, why can't they be friends since they don't really have anyone? So we also learned that that was Opal's first friend, which is... Oh no! I'm sorry. I don't know why that fell. Anyways, we know that Franny and Opal are now friends because Opal was alone and Franny was alone. So now they're friends together. Alright. I don't know why that happened. But we have some ideas about Franny. Alright? So our first one is she fought a bear to get out of her library. The next one is she didn't have any friends. Okay, so those are just two characteristics that we know about, or two facts that we know about Franny that we want to use to figure out characteristics. Alright, so let's focus on she fought a bear to get out of her library. Alright, and I'm going to prove that that's in the text, so all I'm going to do is go back to chapter 7 and see where she talked about. On page 49 is where she talked about fighting off the bears. Page 48 and 49. So in parentheses, I'm going to write 49 because that's where I found the page, alright? So maybe one character quality that I can use to describe Franny would be brave. Alright, so here's my character quality. I put brave. And this is why, okay? So, right here next to Miss Franny, I am going to write Franny is brave because on page 49, she threw a book at a bear to get out of her library. And that is very brave. If I was in a library with a bear, I don't know if I would throw a book at it. I might just run the other direction or hide under a desk. I don't know if I am as brave as Miss Franny here. Alright? So that's an example of a character quality that you can write for Franny. This is not for a grade, it's just something extra. That way we can keep filling out our character qualities for all of our different characters. So if you want to use the same one as me, go right on ahead. This is not for a grade. It's just some extra practice for us to do during this time. Alright, the last thing I want to discuss with you are the questions for chapters 6 through 10. Because remember, that is what is for our grade this Friday. So if we look at our packet, And let's say we flip to the second page of chapters 1 through 10. So it looks like this. We know that question number 1 went with chapter 6 yesterday, right? The questions that go with today is just question number 2, all right? So there's just one question that goes with chapter 7. So I encourage you to go ahead and write out the answer since we've read it today and you have that fresh in your mind. But if you want to wait until Friday, that's perfectly fine too. But just so you know, question number 2 in this packet is what goes along with the chapter that we read today, all right? Again, if you guys have any other questions or any comments about the story, remember, if you want to tell me who your favorite character is and why, please write it down in the comments below. I love reading your guys' comments and just knowing how you guys are doing and how you are enjoying the stories. And I love you and miss you all, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.